This is the Oakwyn Podcast, featuring Morgan Brown and Michael Yu.
Welcome to the Oakwyn Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Yu.
And I'm the Podfather.
And no Morgan today. We can let our guts out and we don't have to suck them in anymore.
It's fine. We don't need it, right?
Better. Yeah. We have an awesome special guest with us today. It's Shawn Kambo from our downtown office. Welcome, Shawn.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting the Podfather. When I heard that, I was like, oh, that was pretty good.
Yeah. It's a great, So that there's this little backstory behind it. What was the backstory, remember?
Well, the backstory was Matt and Adam Scalina came on the podcast, and out of nowhere, Michael just said, oh, the Podfathers of Vancouver real estate. And I thought about that as I was building my company. I was like, I might steal that from Michael. So all credit goes to Michael for that one.
I need a commish.
Also, I didn't really solidify it until I was looking for domain names, and that happened to be available. Podfather Creative. So,
that's right. Yeah,
that's a big part of it.
Yeah. So Shawn, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Shawn Kambo. We had O Weekly that released my quick, introduction.
Oh,
this
cool.
was a few weeks ago. I'm one of the managing brokers at the downtown office, so I'm in addition to Eric Grant, and I'll be supporting him with the functions of managing broker downtown.
Right.
So I've been a realtor for about 10 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I had a chance to buy, sell real estate for a number of years, and I've always been interested in management. And so I decided, you know what? Now is the time to elevate my game and get my managing broker's license.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, let's break it down for those that don't know. What is a managing broker's role?
Oh, that's great. I think different brokerages have different facets that a managing broker deals with. I mean, I'm so fortunate to be here at Oakwyn where we have such a great team. So my position at Oakwyn is making sure that we're compliant with the council, we're compliant with our board, and making sure that our realtors have a coach there, a soundboard, and someone that can motivate, coach, support, and grow them. And so I guess my initiative over the next little bit is to focus on innovation and growth for agents.
Wow, that's incredible. Do you have any plans or little initiatives that you want to explore?
It's a great question. So what I've been doing is I've been sitting down with our agents and I've been discussing communication. So we have a lot of new agents that are entering real estate and joining Oakwyn. And, everyone always says, talk to your sphere of influence, talk to the people that you know. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to break down that communication and trying to explain to them that the relationships that you've created with these people have been based on different things, such as your own values, such as your own proximity to these people. So they see you in a certain light. Now let's rethink that relationship and how do we build trust and how do we communicate that trust in a new relationship, the business relationship. So that's what I've been focusing on with the newer agents.
Yeah. And that's such a hard thing for a lot of people to overcome when they first get started because, they were known as a personal trainer, or in my case, I was known as a dishwasher.
And vitamin salesman.
And a vitamin salesman. So to kind of change that perspective on yourself. So what kind of ways do we do that?
I'm on the spot now. In terms of the ways that you do that, so what I do is I try to take it back to what I've learned through my schooling.
Yeah, okay.
Intercultural competencies, and even understanding that there's an us versus them sometimes approach where sometimes you're the other. And so what I try to do is I tried to make people understand that you have to use communication. It's not just words that you throw at someone. And you think that you've communicated to them.
Right.
It's communicating in a way in which the person who's sitting across from you can understand what you're saying and fully interpret what you're saying and then give you a response that you were looking for. So how do you really step into their shoes? How do you look at their values? How do you look at their background and perspective? And how do you communicate to that? And I think that is the best way to use communication. And then from there, once you understand how they understand, then you can slowly start to relate to them the type of relationship that you're trying to create with them.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's say I am in that process. Is there a book that you read, or is there what resource would I kind of turn to other than, but obviously having conversations with you and kind of having those coachings, but what would you?
There's a few different resources that you can take a look at. So, the one that I focus on with their agents, instead of just giving them journals, journal databases to look at and research studies, is more or less just a self-reflection piece, just being self-aware and just understanding the type of communication that you're getting and then taking it slower. taking time to build that relationship. And through that relationship, you can build the trust. So it's a self-reflection, self-awareness piece. But if they want to take it a step further, they can take a look at Hofstede. They did a study on the different dimensions of culture.
Okay.
So there's typically 6 different dimensions of culture. Without delving into too deeply.
Hey, this is a podcast. This is what we dig. This is where we dig.
Get your shovel.
Yeah, this isn't Instagram. It's not like, or TikTok. We're not going to do a dance and then leave.
No, interesting. So, I mean, Hofstede took a look at different cultures around the world.
Okay.
And some facets of the 6 dimensions of culture could be uncertainty avoidance. So if you look at certain groups of people, whether you look at Europe or if you look at, without delving too much into culture, but once you look at places in Europe, sometimes you find that people are very precise. They need direction. They don't want to, go into uncertainty. They need to make sure that's precise, direct, and coming from a direct order. Whereas if you look at people that might be from North America, once again, this is a large generalization, but you might have more uncertainty avoidance where people are looking to experiment a bit more. Where if you look at
this is really interesting. So like more of the cultural impacts on how people make decisions and how people relate.
Exactly. Yeah. And once you start to realize we're more of a global economy or global world now, where you have access to information, I can, have a video chat with someone from Germany or a video chat with someone from India. What you start to realize is that the world becomes smaller and smaller. And so when I did my thesis, I started to take a look at, intercultural competencies with foreign purchasers for Vancouver specifically, because it was a market that I was aware of. I started to peel back the layers of the onion. Do people work with certain people of different values and cultures? And then I started to realize, no, they can work with everyone. You just need to take time to build that relationship. And so that's what you do. You start to understand them and you start to understand where they're coming from. For example, when I was looking at a home with my family, sometimes we're individualistic where it's like my wife and I are going to go take a look at a home because it's us, it's our family unit. And then once we like that home, we start to bring our families into it. We start to bring our parents into it because we want somebody's input as well.
Right.
So we start to take a look at that aspect of cultures as well. Then we start to take a look at, a management side of it. Is it a North American culture where you have flatter organizations where, your communication with someone that's your leader is a lot more jovial, where it's like, hey, let's try to figure this out together, as opposed to, this is the direction, you have to do it this way, go and do it.
Right.
So it's cool to take a look at those different values and facets of cultures.
Totally. Let's delve a little bit into your education, because you quoted some Hofstede.
Yeah. I heard the word thesis.
Dustin
as well,
Hoffman.
So, yeah.
If you can share with us, tell us your educational story, your journey.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to go into med. I wanted to get as far as possible away from construction and from real estate as possible.
Right.
Because I grew up in a household where literally every dinner table conversation was, hey, there's this new house that came up for sale. I like it because it's in the middle of the block. It's the highest point, in terms of sewage and drainage and stuff. We don't need sump pumps. So that was a conversation I grew up from the very beginning. I remember grade 3, Goosebumps books were, the hit. So I remember reading a Goosebumps book on the steps of a construction site that my father was working on.
Right.
So that's been real estate from the get-go. So when I graduated from high school, I thought it was either med or it was computing sciences. Wanted to computing sciences, and I'd be sitting in the labs until 4 a.m. in the morning coding away.
Right.
And I started to look around me, and I just noticed that this was not for me. I was not excited about this. I mean, could you imagine sitting in a lab and writing algorithms and trying to figure out code? I'm not sure if that sounds really appealing.
Some people love it, but not for you.
It wasn't for me. So I ended up switching into business. I took my first OB class, organizational behavior.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the pieces of the puzzle started to fit. I started to understand that there's certain placements for people, certain skill sets that people had that fit in with an organization. There were certain intrinsic rewards where somebody really enjoyed doing the work because they were really enthralled in it. So it was like, okay, well, instead of having them in a different part, why not try to create a space for them to work at their optimal level,
right,
where they felt valued? And so OB was the first eyes that I got into business.
The spark.
It was the spark.
Right.
And so I went human resources, headstrong into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I graduated from university right around the time we were going through the recession.
Right.
So application on application, just everyone wanted experience
Mm.
for entry-level positions in human resources.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, something needs to change. So what I did was I took a letter carrying position because my parents also worked at Canada Post.
Oh, okay.
And then I also did my real estate license because they always bought, renovated, or built and sold homes.
Yes.
So it just made sense for me to get my license.
Right.
So I got
And
a
you
chance.
knew how to door knock that way.
That's true. That's true.
Right.
The anxiety
Letter
levels.
carrying.
Yeah, the anxiety levels were a little
Yeah.
bit different. I mean,
Getting chased by a dog.
That's exactly. You know how to avoid the angry dogs.
Yeah, the angry dog. Okay.
that's exactly where I was going. So
Keep some what are the kibble in the,
Yeah, there you
pocket and throw it as they chase you.
and that's exactly it. So I mean, there's different levels of anxiety you had when you walked up to the door. For example, when we were walking to the back here, I heard the dog go off, and all of a sudden it's flashbacks to my letter carrying. But yeah, so I learned quite a few things. I mean, the cool thing I learned through letter carrying is there's things such as red dotting. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Is that the for spam mail or
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So when I used to walk into condos and stratas,
right?
I noticed that there's red stickers on them. And I always question, like, what is this for? So that's unaddressed ad mail, meaning if there's unaddressed ad mail, such as flyers, you're not putting it in that slot.
Oh.
Right.
And so that really helped me out for my real estate because then I started to realize, hey, I need to farm or I need to mail in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So that way I'm not missing out on people. Because in the neighborhood I live in, there's a letter carrier who lives across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And he told everyone to red dot themselves. So there's no mail that gets sent out
Ah.
and real estate flyers that get sent out in the neighborhood. So I have to
Wait,
Hand
so
deliver.
you can just put a red dot on your mailbox, or is there a registration process?
You have to contact Canada Post. So a local RPO, retail postal outlet, or your local, mail office, and they'll be able to red dot you.
This is good info.
This is really good info.
You'll miss out on the coupons though.
You'll- yeah, you
Now,
will.
McDonald's coupons is like how I got through university. So
We've got the app for that now.
oh, is there? Oh,
I
there's-
mean,
yeah, there's
I
the
would
internet.
assume.
There's a rewards
I forgot
programs
about
now.
that.
I just got free fries for my son the other week.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I went through that, and then real estate started to take off. And then 2016 happened, where it was one of my best years, not only just for real estate, but I was also getting, engaged during that year as well.
Mm.
And so I started to think to myself, I'm like, okay, real estate's up and up. Like, I need a failsafe. I need something that I can fall back on. And I'm also getting married. My wife was very well educated.
Mhm.
So I'm like, I can't be a dud. I need to go back and do something. So I started to research master's programs because I was interested in management.
Right.
And I figured, that might get my foot in the door for management. People might start actually taking my resume seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did my master's degree. So I originally did a master's of global management,
Mhm.
which really let me dive deeper into management, into cultures, and understanding management as a global landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great. And we had a few different completion options where we could do a project, where we could do a thesis, or if our GPA was high enough, we could actually do a second master's degree through a sister program.
Okay.
And I worked my butt off.
Oh wow. So you got a dual master.
I got 2 master's degrees.
Oh wow.
Wow.
Okay. So a
That's-
master in global management and then
And then I did an MBA in
Oh.
international business.
wow.
And this was really cool because the sister university was in Innsbruck, Austria.
Mm.
And
Ah.
it was situated right between Munich and the Italian border.
Mm.
And it was right in the Alps.
Wow.
So
So it's like the Sound of Music.
it was exactly.
Like, not during the World War II though.
I avoided it by a few years.
Yeah.
But so as a part of that second master's
Wow.
degree, we actually had to fly to Austria and we had to spend 2 weeks there to get situated with the school, get
Oh,
to know
wow.
our colleagues.
So you were there for a couple weeks.
I was there for a couple of weeks. So I
Yeah.
flew into Germany, and then from Germany, I took a flight into Austria, and it was a really cool plane. I landed right on the airstrip, and we walked out, and you could see the Alps right
Wow.
there. And
Wow.
it was the coolest experience.
Mm.
And then we got to this new building, and it was kind of like the Oakwyn building, the headquarters, where it was kind of a curved glass building.
Yeah.
And all you could see if you turned around, so on one side you had a professor, and then if you look behind you, it was all glass walls, and you could see the Alps from
Oh,
our
wow.
class.
So the whole like vista, like all the
It was the Alps.
mountains. Wow.
It was all right there. And it was really cool because at nighttime you could actually see a really faint light that was at the top of the Alps.
Mhm.
And it was one of the, I guess, a building that they had set up there for rescuing people.
Oh really?
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't the Abominable Snowman.
No, I missed him.
He's sitting there with a candle,
right.
a lantern.
Yeah, like, that's where he lives.
Yeah, like and in that program, we had a person who came up with a lung transplant method that had a higher success rate by 15%.
Wow.
So he was one of my colleagues.
Wow.
We had another colleague that worked in Dubai in finance. And then she opened up her own finance company. And I believe she's out of Austria now as well. Another person of mine that worked for Tesla. Another one worked for the actual satellite communications for a telecom company.
Wow.
And it was really cool because there was 3 others from my program that got accepted into that master's degree as well. So we were all there together. And honestly, it was one of the best experiences of my life.
Oh, wow. That sounds super exciting. And like, and MBA programs, so are they, how long are they? Are they like 2 years or 3-4 years? I don't.
There's different completion options.
Yeah.
Some people will do one for a year, and then they have a completion.
Really intense
method.
though. Yeah.
It can be. It's very focused. It's very condensed. And I did a blended program. So it was part on campus and then part online.
Cool.
And at that time, there was a stigma behind online education.
Okay.
Where people are like, oh, it can't be the real deal. Like, it can't be the same as actually being in classes because, you know, your mindset's somewhere else and you're also doing this at the same time. It's a divided attention. And then the pandemic happened and everything went online. So I feel like there's more weight to this degree now than there was before.
Yeah.
But the MBA was more focused on, you know, how do you run a business? How do you run a global business?
Okay.
And then whereas the MGM was focused on how do you deal with people from different backgrounds? How do you effectively manage people? How do you support people?
Right.
And it was cool. Like, I mean, we can really dive deep into this, but from a surface level, it was really cool because it gave me a different way to think. The undergrad was do the work, whereas the master's was think about it, dive deeper. You know, you see a news article, but where are they pulling the data from? You see all these stats. How are they being skewed to paint a certain picture? So then when you see all these news articles, you see all this information that's floating around online, you see these buzzwords.
You can kind of look past it and find out where the truth lies in the article.
How was the data synthesized? How are you painting this picture?
Right.
You know, is there a different perspective? Where's the data being pulled from? Is it a valid source?
Yeah.
So it taught me how to think
critically.
And for that, I'm so thankful.
Right. Wow. So like, you know, Braden and I have high school diplomas.
Well, I've got a bachelor. I don't know about you, buddy.
Okay. So for those of us that aren't masters,
super masters,
you know,
I believe
if I got my masters, I'd ask everyone to call me master. So we're gonna call you Master Shawn.
please don't. You can call me
Master Shawn.
You can call me Primary Shawn.
Okay. All right.
That's a little weird, but we can do that.
All right.
The naming conventions changed, so apparently
really?
we don't call master bedrooms anymore.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard about that.
That's why we call them primary rooms now.
Yeah.
Because there's a hierarchy that's evolved from, I guess, older times.
Yeah. Actually, that happened in like the video industry as well. They used to call like there was a master and a slave like monitor system,
really?
and now you can't call them any. It's primary and secondary. It's
primary. Okay.
Interesting.
I kind of like that.
It's a little. I always thought it was weird.
Well, when I think of there's the master and slave, but then there's like master and apprentice, right? Which is you know, that's how, when I think of master, that's how I think of. Like, you mastered your craft. I don't think of some guy with a whip.
Well, is that still a thing, or did they change that too? The master and apprentice thing.
I think like I'm not sure actually. I don't know.
I guess they just call him boss now.
Yeah. We had a conversation about this as well.
Oh, really?
Oh, you can't say boss.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. That's a vernacular that I don't like. But let's say, okay. What was like one or two of the most valuable things you learned from your master program?
Oh, wow. Well, it was probably through my thesis too, because it was torn apart by the doctors or the professors that I presented to, where they went through it and they just picked it apart. They picked it apart. And I think the most valuable thing I learned from my master's is showing empathy. And I think that's something that we overlook. And that's something that everyone can add to their business. Is the empathy part of it. I mean, you have someone that's in front of you. It's not us versus them. We're a collective. So how do you break down those barriers where it's, you know, me versus you? And that's a barrier that I'm trying to mitigate as well between agents and managing brokers. So I've reached out to about 150 plus agents that I'm supporting. And as soon as they got the phone call, it's like, hey, this is Shawn Kambo calling from Oakwyn. And they're like, okay. Right? And it's like, oh, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm one of the new managing brokers at the downtown office. And then all of a sudden, the radio silence. And they're like, why is a managing broker calling me?
Right. What did I do? Like, think of all my sins.
Right? It's like,
oh, I knew it.
and that's exactly it. And it's just like, no, like you didn't do anything wrong. I'm just reaching out because I wanted to introduce myself. I'm here as a resource. So, feel free to reach out if you need a sounding board. What are you working on? Let's figure this out together. And then it was like, oh, that's great. This is one of the reasons why I joined Oakwyn, because you're doing things differently. And so that was one of the greatest things I took away from the Masters. And that's also another reason why I don't really bring it up often in any conversation, is because I don't want to alienate, or I don't want to use this title to study or any of this stuff. It's the value that I bring. That's what I want to focus on. What am I taking away from my studies? How am I bringing value? So I think empathy is the greatest thing that I learned from my master's degree is, understand that other culture, actually spend time to connect with their fellow human being and understand where they're coming from and understand their values, because they shouldn't be just dusted away and put under the rug. It's more or less, let's explore this together. Let me actually get to know you because I'm genuinely curious in who you are and where you're from. That was one of the greatest takeaways. The other one was, we did a study when I first started my first master's degree, which is, do you eat foods from different regions? Do you read the newspaper? Do you like exploring different cultures? And I was so low in all of those ratings, where it was such an eye-opener for me. And then when they started to actually teach us the content of the course, that's where I started to realize, wow, there's actually value in reading newspapers, because you can dive even further into that. You can understand where the sources of data are coming from. Like, why are you trying different foods? Because you're trying to connect with different people. There's different regions that might grow different crops. And for them, this crop means this, and this is the different foods that they bring to the table. Maybe this is their different thought process on cooking or cooking design. Maybe that might change the way that they build their homes.
Yeah.
Or the differences in what they're looking for in their homes. Right. So it was really cool, because it's these small things that I didn't realize that would make such a huge impact. So that's
totally. My wife's Indian and she's definitely spicy. So she's really, really hot. But, yeah, I think that, I think with everything, like in the little things, there's everything. Like they say that cultures like, language shapes culture. So in the Inuit language, there's like 18 words for snow. And so in French, and, there's more emotion oriented kind of vernacular. So it's kind of, it does paint the whole picture, so like food, language, how they communicate, the writing styles, and just like, even it's funny, even in the Chinese culture, like our last names are first. Like, it
took me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah, so Chinese last names, like their Chinese names typically are 3 characters. The first character is always your family name. And then your name is the preceding 2 characters, which are, that's like your name. So I would be like, you, Michael. I wouldn't be like Michael, you. So but then in the Western culture, it's like your first name first and then your family name second.
Right.
And then I know I have some South American, Latin friends, and they have so many last names. Like, one of the agents from our office has like 22 it's not 22, but like many, many last names. And then and because it's just like they care so much about their kind of like ancestry, their greater ancestry, like their great grandfather type of thing. So it's kind of like, it's really interesting to kind of like how that kind of shapes where someone's at and how they communicate and how you can build relationships with them.
Right.
When you kind of go at their level. Yeah.
I 100% agree. I think some cultures are a bit more direct with their communication, whereas others are a little bit more laissez-faire, where they're, you can say, hey, it's over there. Or you have to be very specific, where it's like, hey, the ketchup is in the fridge. It's on the right side of the door, right beside the mayonnaise. However, you tell me, I'll never be able to find it. Where my wife can open the fridge and she just knows it's right there. And it appears.
Right. Yeah. I think like there's this is pretty basic, but it's a book that, I think when you're somewhat introverted and you're not really like, great at communicating, with others, and it's something that's not your natural kind of skill set. So there's a book, and it's a really classic old book. It's Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Right.
And he really, it's really interesting. So that book obviously helps to shape, how to communicate and be like, it talks about empathy and, kind of how to communicate effectively with others so that you can win friendships, which is the basis for most businesses or people businesses, regardless of what their kind of product or service they're selling. So how to get really good with people. And, some of the things that he talks about in that book is, like Shawn was saying, really matching and mirroring. So like, obviously if they're talking in a certain way or in a certain tonality, a certain flow, then you want to kind of go in with that algorithm that they're communicating with, so that there's a level of comfort and relatability. Especially, we really want to serve our clients really well, and everyone has different philosophies on real estate and on how to build a real estate business. I've always been more of using the consultative approach versus like, let's do as many deals as we can and features and benefits style of selling, but really trying to get to know our clients, their needs, what's going to be the most beneficial for them, and really taking a long-term approach and trying to secure less the transaction, but really like a client for life, like, someone that you're going to be working with for permanently for the long term, which sometimes requires a little bit of patience. But I think at the end, it's way more fruitful and the business is way more rewarding in the long term by kind of utilizing that type of methodology versus like, this is a numbers game of how many like doors I can hammer on. Like, of course there's elements of, that we need to do that in some extent, but when you're doing the introduction, really having that heart to serve and be empathetic and that kind of stuff is huge. Yeah.
That's beautifully put. I mean, the question I had for you was, in terms of building relationships with your clients, is there, it's hard to say this because I feel that every client is going to be different, but is there any method that you take to build those relationships? What do you do to uncover the needs of your client? How do you build that relationship?
So I think when you're engaging with a client or engaging with anyone right out of the gate, there's a certain like wall that's up. There's a certain mask that everyone kind of has,
right?
That they all kind of have to protect themselves, because they want to make sure that, specifically if they're confronted with someone that's in sales or in business and they're not from a business background per se, there's going to be some trepidation. There's going to be some defense. So I think it's really important. I always start with gratitude. So, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. I really appreciate you being here. And, because that kind of changes the paradigm to more of a kindness approach and like a grateful approach. And then really, you really want to really see their wall breaking down, because I think when you come in and you're wearing a suit and they're in their PJs, like, let's say you're doing a listing presentation. I just did one.
With a PJs person?
She was like, she was not wearing PJs, but she was a yoga person.
Oh, yeah.
So she's a yogi.
Right.
And
activewear.
Activewear. Athleisure. Yeah. I actually, my most comfortable pair of work pants are Lululemon pants.
Yeah.
They make
pants.
They wear like, they're more comfortable than like jeans. They're even more comfortable than my sweatpants, actually.
Oh, wow.
And so shout out to Lululemon. They sponsor the podcast. No, I'm just kidding. Hopefully.
We're working on them.
But actually, so she came in, or I went to her place and, she was really defensive, like super defensive.
Right.
And so it took probably, like, we had about an hour listing presentation. It took probably 45 minutes of rapport building, relationship building for her to really feel comfortable. So like, she asked me, for example, would you like some tea, or would you like a tea or some water? And I was like, I'll take the most complicated tea you can have. and then we talked about tea for a while, and then we talked about yoga, and then we talked about what kind of mantras she uses, and really like tried to understand and kind of relate and be compatible at that level.
Right.
And then like kind of toward the last 5 or 10 minutes, we went over, budget and motivation and decision making on her, on her list, on her property. And she was interviewing 3 realtors, and we ended up winning, which was great.
Right.
But I think it really was that 45-minute like human to human interaction where we are able to talk about these different breathing. She showed me some breathing techniques.
That's really
it's
cool.
really, it's kind of, but it was really cool. And then we listed the property, and, she was very, very, it's going to go on the market next week. But so it's just something to kind of relate. So, that requires, matching and mirroring requires being a bit open-minded to different cultures, because we are coming from different cultures, and and kind of going from there. So that's how I do it. How do you do it?
That's a great question. So for a lot of the new agents, I jump into it with them right off the bat. I'm like, what are you doing to prospect? How do you build your business? And so a lot of them are going to social media. A lot of them are doing print mailers. A lot of them are doing door knocking, and some of them are doing open houses. And I always found that open houses were my best methods for prospecting and building relationships, because it gets you in front of someone that already has an intent for real estate, or is at least curious.
Yeah.
And if you can explain to them the benefits of the current listing that you have, that's great. You can say it's a 2-bedroom. You can say it has 700 square feet or 750, depending on where it is. But that's great, but you need to be able to speak to the benefits, right? Some people will buy an iPhone or, an Android or whatever it is based on the specs. But once you start diving into a little bit deeper of the benefits of what they're looking to buy, that's when they really feel like you're making the connection between the property and them and really understanding their needs, and you're building confidence as well. And so my bread and butter has always been open houses, because it's the first connection with the people. And then building the relationship with them is honestly just asking a lot of questions. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to figure out what works for them. Are they someone that likes a lot of space? Well, why do they like a lot of space? Because they like to entertain. They don't always want to be bumping into their cabinets, or, they're someone that wants quiet and peacefulness at night. So maybe you're looking for washer and dryers that are on a different floor. So when you actually get a chance to get to know the person, you get a chance to see the benefits of the units that you're going to show them to them. And so I find when you ask lots of questions, you get a chance to know them. You get a chance to break down those walls, as you mentioned, and then just remaining genuinely curious. And I think that's the best way of building rapport with people, and building the relationships. Yeah, that's so key. And I think understanding their needs, and a question that I ask a lot of buyers that we work with is like, okay, let's like write down your wish list. If you were to wave a magic wand and we were to find the perfect property for you besides price, like what would be on the wish list, right? And then sometimes it'll be like surprising what people say, some people, like, we just assume everyone wants natural light. Well, I've sold a lot of north facing properties because they're like, I work nights, I like to sleep in, it's like, and so, but I would be like, oh, this is worth a little bit less than a south facing one, because, so for those reasons. So like, we don't want to make any of those assumptions. So I've been surprised, quite a bit. I had a client that cared about how many electrical outlets were in certain rooms, because he has like a charger in everything. Like, that's me.
Look around.
There you go. This place is it's wired. So just all these different types of, you want to just try to understand. So like we've like, for example, like shopping for houses, like having a man cave or a basement, it wasn't important for the wife, but it was really important for the husband. And then it kind of like made some more sense. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, it's good to kind of have those exploratory conversations with clients that you're about to work with. But talking about kind of prospecting, so you've been meeting, and speaking with agents right now. What have you been finding in your conversations have been the most effective forms of that?
Oh, that's a great question. So for the mailers themselves, I don't hear too much of the success rates for mailers. But once again, if you're new in the industry, the one thing you have to understand about mailers is it takes a long time to build traction through the mailers. And not only that, I believe a good prospecting method should have some sort of measurable outcomes. So for mailers, it might take some time, 12 months, 16 months, 18 months. As you mentioned before, you can't just market yourself once and then call it a day. So for mailers, I haven't heard much because they're fairly new. With open houses, it sounds like it's been great for turnouts. I was talking to Sid just last week. I think he had between 15 to 20 people that came through an open house. And so we had one of our new agents that sat in on that as well. And they got a chance to see how the open house went. And then the next weekend they did it themselves. And then I started to mention, hey, maybe you need catchphrases or taglines that will bring people's attention to your movies or to your videos. And so he had one video that recently came out, what $765 can get you on commercial drive. And then right away I was just like, hey, I want to hear more. I want to see where he goes with this. And then he did a really cool walkthrough. And I think social media is huge for that as well, because the new generation is all over social media. And then open houses, it seems like they found a good prospect through that as well. They found a lead through that wants to list and buy. And so, they're starting the conversation with them there. So I find that open houses for me have been significantly powerful. And I think that's also powerful for the new agents. The other thing I mentioned was people, whether they go 10 minutes east or 10 minutes west, that's only 10 minutes. So you might want to take a look at doing open houses for similar price points because it'll get you more face time with those people, because chances are they're probably looking east and west by about 10 or 15 minutes. So I think that's also going to be helpful. We're going to try it out. I've mentioned it last week and I'm going to follow up and see how it went.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I think, once you you can establish some geographical boundaries and stuff like that for your open houses, that if you're targeting a certain area, you can kind of farm in that area or in that certain price band potentially, because people definitely look at different areas. One agent in our office, she won't mind me sharing her name, Shala Bakar. So Shala is an amazing agent out of our downtown office. She's a top producing realtor as well, and she's really, really honed in on her business over the last few years working with us. And she does all her open houses in downtown every single weekend. She tries to pick one up in downtown. And basically she runs into the same people every week. So she's been doing this consistently for the last 3 or 4 years. And many of her best clients have seen her 3, 4, 5 times. And they're like, you're so hardworking. You're so like amazing. And your product so well. So she's demonstrated value. So they're like, we're going to work with you 100% when we're buying our property. So she's picked up innumerable purchasers and sellers through that initiative. And and really created a backbone of her business. And that also helped her to, because she incorporates that with her social media as well. So she's able to like show that she's, that she's showcasing property and so on and so forth. So she's really, really great. And this is, so now she's doing most of her own listings, but she was doing everyone else's open houses when she first got started, like everyone else's open houses in downtown. And she was always specific about giving a detailed report of what type of people came through for the listing agent. So they would want to give her all of her open houses. So, I think it kind of goes both ways. And so, that's something that's a really great method to prospect. And that's where you're going to be able to catch someone while they're in the real estate sales cycle. So while they're kind of thinking about either buying or selling, or kind of they're in that, warm kind of phase of their decision making for real estate. So that's, obviously when you do a door knocking randomly through a neighborhood, it's really hit and miss. Like 90% of the people you're going to enact with are just a hard no. And then like 9 are like, maybe. And then there's that 1% or less that are like, okay, actually thinking about selling. So like, it's law of averages type of thing. So I think that there are better odds at the open house, but so that's one method for sure. And it really does depend. I feel like it really depends on your own like strengths and personality though. So I had an agent that I worked with really closely, and he was like super introverted. he doesn't like to talk. And, he's really, really like a really kind person. So I got to work with him. I got to know him really well. And what I found is that he grew up here in Vancouver, and he had this deep network of like his elementary school friends,
right,
and his high school friends. And he always hung out with them. And so I was like, okay, like, what do they do? And like, there's a doctor, there's a lawyer, there's a dentist. Like, he works for this family company. This guy owns a carpet company. This guy owns like, and I was like, okay, well, we need to like work in that field. So I was like,
right,
because he was doing open houses and door knocking and flyers and stuff like that, and he was getting no traction. He was like at 0%,
right,
for like years. So he was taking like certain different kinds of, I think he was taking like different coaching programs that were kind of scripting. He was using scripts and stuff like that, but it just didn't work well for him.
right.
So we did a program instead where, he would take people out for lunches, dim sum specifically, coffees, and also just like really built deeper relationships with his immediate sphere of influence. And he'd introduce opportunities to them and their families. And so every week we would research kind of like a great house in East Van that was kind of land value, and then a condo that was, or an apartment building that was, for sale, that was a good value.
Right.
And basically he would just like give people opportunities. And he built a, $300,000 to $500,000 consistent business in just those like intimate lunches, getting to know these kind of people.
Right.
And he's awesome. He's been working with us for a long time. And yeah, he's just, so there's many ways to cook an egg, but you got to
Right.
find what kind of works for you, I think. Yeah.
I think that's a great share. I mean, you don't have to be an extrovert in order to make it in real estate.
Right.
You just have to go with an angle that works for you. I think that's a great share.
Yeah. So I think, there's so many different methods, and, something that we really want to, work with at Oakwyn is really being like dynamic and being kind of, really open. And our leadership team, which Shawn is a big part of, is going to be really open to helping to kind of move and shift you to take the right decisions. And so, like, what are you looking forward to most in this role as managing broker at Oakwyn, Shawn?
Over the last few weeks,
Sure.
I've been exposed to every facet of our operations, and now I'm slowly getting into it where I fit in with the rest of the operations. The two key areas, and I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, were growth and innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that everyone can learn, but are they actually growing? Is there a nugget of information that really changes their perspective on the work that they've conducted and how they want to continue conducting their business moving forward? So that's the growth part of it. In terms of innovation, I want to take a look and see what the best practices are in the market, and then try to drive it a little bit further than that. For example, when I was doing my undergrad, I had a professor that was always talking about benchmarking and best practices. And benchmarking and best practices. Like, it was literally drilled into my mind.
Okay.
And so the best practices is you take a look at other companies that are doing something significantly well, and you try to benchmark that best practice. You try to get to the same level and do things just as consistently as well as those other companies that are doing it well. And then I took another course, a sustainability course in my master's, and the professor's like, okay, take the idea of benchmarking best practices and throw it out the window. And all of a sudden our minds just imploded. We're like, we've been told that this is the way that you need to do business moving forward.
Sure.
And he's like, no, in order to become the best, you need to innovate. You need to come up with better ways. He was also the one that was ahead of making the Nike shoe boxes smaller, so that way they could ship more and there's way more sustainability for the company.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at these examples of how someone was able to innovate, that's my passion. My passion is looking at innovation. How can we do things better? How can we make it better? How can we, make it more cost effective? How can we make it more sustainable? How can we drive this to make us even better than the best?
Absolutely.
So those are the two key initiatives that I'm looking forward to. It's not a short play.
No.
It's a long-term play, but those are the two things that I'm looking most forward to.
For sure. And you have a background with a very innovative company. Previous to working at Oakwyn, you worked for. Do you mind me sharing?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
How deep I can dive into it is different.
Sure.
But I worked for Apple.
Yeah.
So I started off actually on the floor at Apple because I was interested in the company. I wanted a bit more stability with my timeline for working. So I joined Apple. And after about 3 months, I was promoted into a business-to-business account manager position.
Mm-hmm.
So I managed a number of accounts across Canada. And it was fantastic to see this network where, we think that we're so minuscule for businesses. We find that businesses are so, they work and operate in a certain way in certain functions. And then you drive business-to-business sales. You build these relationships with these companies and you build your devices, your products, your services into the actual functions of the business. And it was really cool to see that. It was really great to build those relationships.
Right. Apple's such a company that people admire so much, from the outside.
Right.
Obviously being an innovative company, being, even having success after the founder, passed and everything like that, and actually having more success fiscally for sure. So what was it like working there? Like culturally, like corporate culture or kind of?
It was the people that I worked with that brought me in every single day. We bantered every single day. We built great relationships and we had family Friday lunches, like shout out to Krista, but we had family Friday lunches where each one of us from our team would choose a different restaurant to go to for lunch. And it was really cool because, someone had probably just tried a really great taco place.
Oh, great.
Or a great sushi place. Or just
I love that.
And it was really cool because every week it rotated. So somebody got a chance to introduce us to different food that we've never tried before.
Oh, cool.
And we also got a chance to put our work aside whenever we went out for lunches. So it was like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? What did you get out to? Who's getting engaged? Who's dating?
Yeah.
Stuff, right?
Gossip. What?
Right. Yeah. No, it was a great way of breaking down just getting away from your work relationship and just building person-to-person communications. In terms of Apple, is really magical because we had these really cool devices that really changed the way that people did work.
Right.
For example, an iPad could have been a music composition tool for someone, or for someone else who's keeping inventory within their business. Or for someone else, it was a pain because what happened was an employee entered their own iCloud information into the device and all of a sudden it was locked once they left the company.
Yeah.
So we got a chance to build in mobile device management into the devices.
Yeah.
We got a chance to figure out different ways in which they could procure the devices, why it was beneficial.
Right.
So it was really cool because we went from just selling a device, selling these specs on a piece of paper, to how does this actually benefit your life? How does this change the way that you do business?
Yeah.
Instead of writing things down on a piece of paper.
Totally.
Right? You could be a floor shop.
Yeah.
And if you look at the floor shop, you might have a bookkeeper who needs a MacBook.
Right.
You might need an inventory specialist who needs an iPad.
Yeah.
You might have a delivery driver that needs an iPhone.
Mine's a YouTube player.
It is great. It does more things than just
and
that.
I've been playing a lot of mobile Magic the Gathering. So
Oh, that's awesome.
video game.
Oh, really?
Oh man, I think I'm getting hooked and I have to stop. And this is my intervention.
This pre, you need to limit your screen time. Go and lock your account.
I made a rule for myself. I can only play video games when I'm on the Peloton.
Oh, that's a great
when
rule.
when I'm like pedaling my legs because at least I'm like doing something productive.
Yeah.
Oh, that's super cool.
But that's sorry, I interrupted you.
Tell me more about Magic the Gathering. So it was talked about. It's like, hey, what's Michael all about? And they're like, he really
This is a big part of his life.
He really likes board games. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like Dungeons and Dragons type of board games. He's like, are you serious?
Yeah.
And so it's true.
Yeah, it's true. Of course. Yeah. I'm like a huge I love fantasy, medieval times. I love space. I love different philosophy and stuff like that, and different mythologies. So that's something that I'm very interested in from a story perspective. But I like Magic the Gathering specifically because it's a strategy game that has elements of luck. Right. So I know and this might be like self-fulfilling prophecy or what have you, but it's helped me to, and it's all about decision making and kind of resource management, and then elements of luck because it's a turn-based game where you draw cards off of a deck. Right. So it's so it's helped me a lot. I think in terms of making hopefully good decisions.
Right.
And also it's fun. It's a it's like you want to play nice with others. It's kind of, you want to play in the sandbox because you don't want to be someone that's too like, you want to be good, but you want to be like good and like not a good sport, with other people. So
you don't want to just crush people and laugh in their face.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to like.
Sometimes you do.
Yeah, you don't want to be like in your face. Like,
Sounds like Monopoly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I enjoy those, and I loved like Settlers of Catan back in the day. I never played at a competitive level, but I liked Texas Hold'em poker.
Okay,
I like the
cool.
math. I like simple math and probability and stuff like that. So yeah, so like that's kind of how I like to enjoy my spare time. So for example, like never been a big athlete or anything like that, I could spend all day and all night in a card shop or in a board game shop. Like whenever I go to like out in the kind of anywhere, any town, like I'll go for a coffee and then I'll go to the board game shop and just like root around there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, like if I have some time to kill.
Do you find that it's the larger cities that you visit that have those type of amenities?
No, they're everywhere. They're
Okay.
but they're always in these remote, because it's a passion business. So
Right.
like anyone that owns a board game store or a comic store or a card shop is just incredibly passionate about their hobby, and they're just kind of trying to carve out a job for themselves, because
Okay.
they're not going to make like anything significant, but they just are very passionate about. So you can always go there, and then they're always wanting to have a good conversation, talk about the latest set, talk about the latest kind of like decks that are out there. And yeah, so I grew up in those shops. Like I grew up on like Main Street. There was a shops called Lucky's, cards and musics and comics, and like it's like this tiny obscure shop beside a gas station on King Edward, and like it's so tiny, like,
Right.
and I would spend the entire summer there. Every day after school I'd be there, like, until it closed, like every day. So that's kind of my sad tale of a lonely teen.
Did they have to kick you out every day? Like,
Well, no,
okay,
they-
buddy, we're sweeping
No,
the
because
floor.
they wanted to be there too. Like these
Yeah.
these are like nerdy guys that are just there to hang.
Right.
And it's just like weird. We'd be like 13 years old with like some 30-year-old guy. We had this common passion, and then yeah. So that's where I come from, and I think I've leveraged, and so I had to work on the other side, the EQ side
Right.
of the equation, when it came to real estate, and when it came to, because I am not a natural like sales guy. I'm not smooth or anything like that. I
Right.
wasn't a ladies man, and I wasn't popular. I didn't have every all the network or whatever. So that's kind of where I come from. But that's there's like I said, there's so many different routes to success.
Right.
And, the whole element of, if you're a realtor, you have to be like a Wolf of Wall Street kind of like
True.
killer and a trained assassin. And I'm a ninja.
Yeah.
I'm like a beast. Like, you don't have to be a beast. You can you can be like some nerd like that's passionate, likes to nerd out on stuff. And,
Right.
people are going to see that you're sincere, and see that you care, and see that you really want to see the best for their families. And you don't have to be kind of this slick guy with, a sharp suit on all the time. And you can be yourself and be the best of yourself and run an amazing business. And you don't have to be unethical. You don't have to be, transactional. You can have a heart and actually do really well. And I know this because obviously have so many friends at the company that have that same experience. And working with Braden, like he cares, like he's really passionate, and he loves what he does, and he's successful, and Sean, and Morgan, and so it's just great to just see all that all the things we assume, it's not necessarily the truth.
Right.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, it's interesting because when I walked into Oakwyn, there's the work hard, stay humble on the wall. And this was my gripe that I had with social media as of recently, where it's just all buzzwords. People are creating these posts, and where's the actual substance behind it?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, work hard, stay humble. I'm like, okay, like, is this just a word on the wall? And then I started to come into work every single day. And that's exactly the people that we have working here.
Mm-hmm.
They're people. They're people at the end of the day. We have some of the highest producers in Vancouver. that honestly, they just want to shoot the breeze with you in the cafeteria. They want to grab a coffee with you, just see how things are going. They genuinely care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the biggest hesitations I had for joining real estate, because I went into these coaching sessions where it's like, oh, you go and door knock on someone's door and, you ask them if they're interested in selling. It's like, okay, well, do you know anyone else that's willing to sell? Okay, well, what if I found you a better house? Would you sell? Or would you sell in 6 months? What if I came back? And it's just like, wow. I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this. And then as time went on, I started to realize, no, we're human beings. And what we're doing is we provide a service, but we're so well at what we do. That's one of the reasons why people look to us to provide that service. And if they're not ready to sell, no worries. We're here when you do think to sell. And we would love to help you out. So give us a shout when you're ready. When are you going to move next? Do you know anyone else that wants to sell? There's a certain way that you do it. And I feel like that's what we have at Oakwyn, where it's not a push, sell. It's more or less, we're doing really well at this. Let's continue putting people first. And let's do a great job at that.
Yeah, and be a valuable resource. And instead of kind of trying to make this like transaction happen, like how are we gonna get this old lady out of this place? Like that just is, to me, it's just like that just hurts. So and it's something that our everything we have, our core values, our work hard, stay humble slogan. They're very carefully curated, very intentionally, because we know the power of language and how it impacts and affects cultures. I've said some things to Pri that she'll never let me forget. So I will be very precise with my language. And so I think that's something that's really important. As you're even conducting your own business out there and you're out in the field, people are paying attention to how you communicate and how you make them feel. And I think it's, even in social media posts, just even SIDS change from what can you get for $760 versus I'm cool and this is my thing. It's a different thing. It's it's more of a resource. So that's how much what you get for that amount of money. Okay, well, how much is that per month and a monthly payment with today's interest rate? That's a valuable resource. And so versus, hey, I'm wearing my shades and I'm stepping out of a Lambo and that type of attitude is something that, for some I understand, but and no judgment on how they do business. But I think you should find your own method and your own strengths and kind of go from there. Yeah.
I agree.
Awesome. So Shawn, if you can believe it, Braden, if you can believe it, it's been almost an hour. So
time flies.
I know time flies when you're talking about Magic the Gathering. Shit. Okay, Shawn. Anything? So, what's the best way in which an agent can get in touch with Shawn Kambo?
Give me a call on my cell phone or shoot me an email. Or what you can do even better, I'm in the office every day, Monday to Friday. Come by and just sit down, chat. Let's go grab a coffee.
Awesome. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for being a part of the Oakwyn podcast. So this has been the Oakwyn podcast with Shawn Kambo. If you've enjoyed this podcast, Braden, what should we do?
You can go to oakwyn.com/join and type in that little message box. Podcast 2023, I think it is right now.
It's Unite 2023.
Oh, it's been a while.
Oh, okay, it's been a little while. So you type in the podcast, I listen to the podcast, and you will get a free piece of mystery swag. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please rate us 5 out of 5 on the podcast platform you're listening to it. And until next time, guys, thanks so much for listening to the Oakwyn podcast, and we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.